Hi, Dobby the Fishing Elf here. In today's video I'll show you how to remove and replace the diesel fuel injector on this 2011 C4 Grand Picasso. The first thing we need to do is remove this cover. This simply pops off, and I've already removed one of the tabs already. As you can see, this injector has been leaking. As you can see all this shininess. Using a tack lifter, I remove the other rubber stopper, revealing the two 13mm bolts. After this I get my 30mm deep socket. You can also use a spanner for this as well, and start to remove them. While I'm removing these, I'll just talk about why I'm removing the airbox. We need to remove the airbox so we can get access to the fuel return lines. Because for injector 4 we need to remove the fuel return line completely. For the other injectors you can get away with just unclipping the connector on the injector that you want to remove and the next injector along, and just pull the return line out of the way. Just getting started on the second 30mm bolt now. As you can see, they come out relatively easy. If you wonder what tools I'm using, there'll be links in the description for all the what's in my toolboxes that I've done on the tools that I've used in this repair. I think all of the tools that I use in this video have had what's in my toolboxes now, so hopefully you'll enjoy watching them after this video. I'll also try to remember to add a playlist of all the tools I've used as well. To finish off the airbox removal, all we need to do is remove the two air pipes. These simply pop out, as you see me doing here. Next up we need to remove this pipe. So I'm using a 7mm socket on a nut driver here, and it's a matter of unscrewing the two worm drive clamps. Again, we need to remove this so we can get access to the fuel return line, and also it just makes it easy to get the injector out, as you haven't got to fish under the pipe to get to the clips on the fuel return line, and also it blocks the access to the bolt that holds the injector down. Overall, it's very important that we remove this pipe. If you were doing the other injectors, you would not need to remove this pipe. It's only for injector 4 that you need to remove this. If you were doing the other injectors, you wouldn't need to. I'm just going to give everything a quick clean now, just so you know debris falls in the engine. Also, it makes things just a bit less slippy, so it'll be easy to get the fuel return lines off. Now it's time to start removing the fuel return line. The easiest way I've found to do this for this first part is to push in the green tab with a flat bladed item, like this tack lifter, and then just pull it out and it'll pop straight out. Next we need to remove the electrical connector to the injector. This is done by squeezing it and giving it a gentle tug and wiggle, and it should just pop out. They can be a bit awkward, so be careful, they are quite fragile. Now it's time to remove the fuel return line from the injectors themselves. These can be quite tricky, and they are quite fragile and they do tend to break. The best technique I've found so far is to pull on the long green tab that is furthest away from you and pull up at the same time, and generally they pop off quite easily. As you can see, it's a bit shaky here in the footage, but that's what I do with these two. It can, like I said, be a bit tricky, but trust me, just keep pulling on that side and it will pop up. Eventually you'll hear it pop off. Be careful not to lose the retaining clips. Sometimes you can't get them up like that and you have to get a pick in, like I did here. Just hook the pick under the bottom of the green clip and pull up, and it'll pop off. As you see, even with a pick they can be a bit tricky, but trust me, it'll come soon. And there she goes, all off with no damage to the fuel return line. The next thing we need to remove is the 14mm flare nut holding the fuel line on. Before we get too far into this, I should say, but make sure you put a cable tie on the fuel line, otherwise the flare nut may end up down the back of the engine and it'll be a right pain to get back. This one broke loose pretty easily, some of these can be a bit tougher. You need to get a 30mm spanner on the injector end. But once it's out loose, just wind it off with your fingers. Now it's time to remove the fastener that's holding down the injector itself. This is an E12 torque socket, and I'm using a 6-inch extension here to reach down. And yeah, just a matter of breaking it loose, and once it's loose, just wind it out by hand. It's a fairly long bolt, so it do take a little while to get out. And here comes the bolt now. Now it's time to start removing the injector itself. They can seal in sometimes, so you just have to wiggle them and hope they're the best. This one isn't too bad, it is wiggling quite freely on its own. Sometimes you need to get a puller involved. There are various different techniques to remove the injectors. I'm going to list a few of them now just to make it a bit easier for you. So, like I said, you use the wiggling technique. Just gently wiggle the injector side to side. Don't twist it, just wiggle it, because otherwise you may undo the injector. The other options we have are getting a puller and using a puller to remove it. I haven't got a puller for one of these, so I didn't do that. There's also the option where you loosen the bolt almost all the way out and then you start the engine. You will need the fuel return lines off that, and sometimes you just make the engine pop the injector out. They are quite notorious for getting seized in those, so I got quite lucky with this one. Even though I was quite lucky, I still had to get my tack lifter involved just to give me a bit of extra leverage. All I did was lever this under the hold down clamp and give it a quick wiggle up. Not very much, just a little bit. After that I just went back in with my hand and just kept wiggling and pulling it. You can feel it going. It's all quite good. And here comes the injector. And finally, here is the hold down clamp now. This is the part that holds the injector down with the bolt that we already removed. Now it's time for reassembly. This is basically the reverse of how we took it off. So as you can see here, the injector is going back in. And now I'm just making sure it's all lined up. I had wanted to make this reseat and reseal video, but unfortunately the footage I got of the resealing and reseating wasn't very good, so I decided just to make it a straight how to change your injector video. I will revisit that in a future video. I put the hold down clamp on the injector when I put it back in. So now here you can see the bolt coming in. And now I'll start to tighten it down by hand. Once it's all lined up and everything else, I just hook the fuel line back in before I tighten the bolt down. And then start to tighten the bolt down properly with the ratchet, as you can see me do here. And yeah, it just simply tightens it down until you get it as tight as you can get it. As you can see, once it's tight, you can't move it anymore. The next step after that is to reattach the fuel line flaring up. If you use the cable tie trick, it shouldn't be too far away, and you simply start it with your fingers, just thread it on, you don't need cross threading. And then yeah, just keep going until it's tight as you can get by hand, and then get your 14mm spanner in and tighten it down with that. You want these to be fairly snug. Once you're happy with the tightness of the fuel line, then it's time to reattach the fuel return line. This is fairly simple. They simply push back on and clip into place. It's a lot easier to put them on than it is to take them off. I always find this easier to get the fuel return line into place first before clipping in the clips down. Once I get it into place, I'm going to start with clip number 1, which is the one closest to the gearbox, and I'll work my way across. Doing 2. And 3. And then finally 4. While I'm doing this, I'd like to remind you to drop me a like if you've enjoyed this video so far. I also like to just go back and double check the connection I already made before I put the last part in. And then finally connecting it into the fuel return rail itself. And the last thing to make the injector live is just to reconnect the connector to it. We simply just push it back on, you'll hear it click into place. We're almost there now. You just need to reconnect the EGR valve pipe. So this is a simple matter of pushing it back on. The best technique I found for this is to put the back on first and then push it all the way back, and then it should just pop back in on the front as you see here. And then it's just a matter of tightening down the 2 worm drives, Jubilee clips, whatever you'd like to call them, with the 7mm socket. You gently twist them down. If you have any questions about this video, just ask me in the comments and I'll get back to you as quickly as I can. As you can see, we've finished the first clamp now. Just finishing off the second clamp in a few moments, and there we are, that's done. Unfortunately, I couldn't find the footage of me refitting the airbox, so I had to borrow a bit of footage from an old video. The bit of footage you're seeing is actually from the air filter replacement video I did not too long ago, well, about 6 months ago now. And yeah, this is just basically how you refit the airbox. Quite simple really. All you do is just line up the airbox, put the 2 13mm fasteners in, tighten them down. I'm using a spanner here, but earlier on in the video I used the 30mm deep socket, and then reattach the air pipes after you've done that, and put the top cover on, and that's it, the job is done. If you enjoyed this video, why not drop a like? Any questions or feedback, let me know in the comments. I normally drop 2 videos a week, so if you haven't subbed to the channel yet, you should, and then you'll never miss another video. Do you know anyone else who would enjoy watching this video? Then feel free to share it with them. Thanks for watching until the end. Have a sensational day.